Thank you everyone for tuning in. I am Dan Brown, the program manager here at College Diabetes Network. We are honored to have with us today George Huntley and Stuart Perry representing the NDVLC, the National Diabetes Volunteer Leadership Council. Between them, many decades of diabetes leadership and advocacy experience. So we are very lucky and thankful to have them with us. So this presentation is part 2 of 2. If you missed the first half, we have it posted on YouTube, so we can post the link in the chat in just a moment here if you want to get caught up. The presentation today should last about 30 to 45 minutes. Please feel free to ask questions at any time. You can find the chat function down at the bottom of the screen, and feel free to turn on your video and audio if it's appropriate to ask a question if you would like. Otherwise, feel free to just sit tight with your volume muted and your video off. So I think that's it. I will pass it over to George and Stu to introduce themselves and get us started here. Thank you.
Super. Thank you, Dan, and welcome everybody. I'm George Huntley, and for those that are here for the second one, I'm impressed that you came back for more after hearing us the first time. So we're flattered and happy that you're with us. I am George Huntley. I'm currently the president of the National Diabetes Volunteer Leadership Council, and I am, oh, Stuart's internet just went down, so I guess I'm flying solo until he comes back. I just got a text from him, so his cell phone works. I am living with type 1 since 1983. I've got a sister, niece, and great nephew, all with type 1, have type 2 in the family as well. I developed type 1 in college, which was about 3 years ago. The College Diabetes Network did not exist when I was in college, and I really wish it had, because I would have probably had an easier time in my first decade with this disease than I actually did. So hats off to the efforts and the groups, and kudos to everybody involved. Stuart and I have been volunteers. We're both former national chairs of the board of the American Diabetes Association, and have been involved in advocacy for a very long time. And that's what NDVLC does. So today's piece, and I'll keep going until he joins me again, and with any luck, that didn't work. Let me try over here. Hey, how about that? Eventually I can learn. We're going to talk about advocacy. We're going to talk about who the fuss makers are. This is a quick recap of what you learned last time, and I won't spend a lot of time on it. And we're going to get into other topics that you want to make a fuss about. And then we're going to talk again about how to make a fuss, because if you don't know how to make a fuss, it's not going to do any good. So just being fired up about something is good, but being fired up and knowing what to do is really where it's at. So I'm going to keep us going. And who are fuss makers? The definition of an advocate. Those who were with us last time on Monday, hopefully you still remember this. A person who publicly supports or recommends a cause or a policy, one who pleads the cause of another, one who defends or maintains the cause or a proposal, someone who makes a fuss. So that is the definition of an advocate. Are you a fuss maker? And you ask yourself, what does a fuss maker look like? And as a reminder, that used to look a little different than we look today. I've been putting hair extensions on, and I don't sound like the Beatles, but I think that's a really cool slide, so I share it again. So now we're going to get into the meat of it. What do we want to make a fuss about? What are our hot topics this time? We talked about the rising cost of insulin last session on Monday. So we're going to start with insurance restrictions and non-medical switching, pump choice, and some things that you ought to be tuned into. So let's talk about non-medical switching. So this is what happens when your insurer decides how you should manage your diabetes and not you or your healthcare provider. So how many folks, and the chat session is open, so I would encourage you to make a comment, and if I'm missing it, if Sarah or Dan, if you could let us know. But has this happened to you where you're on Humalog and you've been told you have to switch to Novolog because Novolog won the negotiation battle with your pharmacy benefit managers? As a reminder, the pharmacy benefit managers are the ones that set the formulary. They're the ones that in a healthcare plan, they're the ones that handle the prescription side of a healthcare plan. So as you go through that, and I'm trying to see if I can see chats and I can't, oh well. But as you go through that, the pharmacy benefit manager decides, do you get Novolog, do you get Humalog, do you get Lantus, do you get Levemir, do you get Basaglar? They decide that for you as to what they're going to cover in the plan. And that is basically decided upon based upon how much of a rebate did that pharmaceutical manufacturer provide to the pharmacy benefit manager. So if the rebate's big, then it looks like Stuart's coming his way back in. If the rebate's big, then they're going to get in. If the rebate's small, well, they may out. But the person who's really out is you and the patient, because now you've got to switch. And the average endo practice spends 1,500 man hours a year on unreimbursed appeals. These are unreimbursed man hours. Effectively, one full-time equivalent person is spent on appeals, and a lot of times these folks are they're stopping spending that time because they just can't afford it. They just can't afford it. So if non-medical switching hasn't happened to you, you're really lucky and probably in the minority.
Hi, George.
Stuart, you're back.
Hey, Stuart's back. And George, oh, sorry, go ahead, Stu.
I am back on my cell phone rather than my computer because my entire office lost phones and internet.
Oh my!
So
that's incredible timing.
I'll
effectively out of.
Then Stuart, I'll drive and you chime in with color commentary because you can't see the slide.
Yeah, I mean this is going to be hard on my cell phone, George. So you go right ahead. You're doing a great job, no matter what they say about you.
You know, I don't hear that much, but usually it's because I have my speaker off. Dan, what do you have?
Just going to mention we had some comments in the chat from some folks. Caitlin Hill shared that she recently had to switch from Novolog to Novolog from Humalog, but luckily hasn't had any issues yet. And I was sharing as well that I feel like I have this happen to me with test strips and meters all the time.
It's really annoying, and we're moving. The next slide moves us to the meters. And this is really where you start out in theory when they do these non-medical switchings, it's a drug that's interchangeable. But as we know, insulin's a biologic, and so that's not always interchangeable. We all react a little differently with that kind of stuff. And if you think about Humalog and Novolog, that usually works. But you think about Levemir and Lantus. Well, that's totally different dosing. You take that differently. That is not one for one. Just keep going and you're fine. And that shouldn't happen. And then you move forward and you say, okay, now it's pumps. So I'm on a pump. I currently am on the Tandem. I've been on the MiniMed. I've been on the D-Stronic back when that existed. United Healthcare made a contract with MiniMed, with Medtronic, and they were, for the longest time, it was MiniMed or nothing. Now, it's a fine pump, nothing wrong with that pump, but nobody says you can only drive a Chevrolet or a Ford or a Honda. You should have choices, because we select a piece of equipment, especially that's a very personal decision based upon its features and how your comfort level in doing it. Because if you're comfortable with that pump, you're going to have better control. And if we let this happen and we let United Healthcare lock their system down to just Medtronic, what's that going to do to the market? United Healthcare has a sizable chunk of the market. If everybody went down this path, you know, what's going to happen to Omnipod? Now, the good news is we did now get Omnipod into United Healthcare because enough people complained. So advocating does work, fuss making does work, but Tandem isn't covered, to my understanding, with United Healthcare. You've got to go outside of the system and get through that. What's next? A CGM? Just one of those? One blood glucose meter? No one is going to go into the marketplace if there's not an avenue to the market to sell their product. So it's going to really impede competition, and it's going to impede new development. And those are the things that we really should get fired up about, because it's, you know, it's our future and the future of how we're going to, you know, take advantage of, you know, breakthroughs, et cetera. There's a lot of things coming out there. And if companies like Bigfoot and others are not able to really get into the market, it's not good for people with diabetes. So step therapy, have you all understand what step therapy is? Step therapy is a fail first plan where you have to try this drug first before you go on the next drug, or this, you know, process first before you go on to the next one. So your doctor may say, based upon you need this, but your plan says, well, that's expensive, so I'm going to make you fail on these other two things before you can get to this. Now, you might say, all right, well, I understand that. That's, you know, I'm here about saving money. Maybe I'm conscious of that. But what happens is you've now changed to your employer has changed. Maybe you're on your parents' insurance and their employer's changed. Maybe they're the same employer, but they changed from Cigna to Aetna to Blue Cross, and now you're in a new Blue Cross plan, and you were with Aetna, and you've already failed 3 times on Aetna, and now Blue Cross makes you step all the way back and start from zero. These are things that we should be fighting hard against, because this should be provider prevails. Your doctor should be making these decisions for you and not the insurance company. And these are things in a health plan for you to be tuned into and hopefully make a fuss about. And if you've had this happen to you, please let us know that. If you could send, just through Dan at least, you know, send a note and he'll forward them so that we can have a communication, because the more stories we have on this stuff, the better.
And George, we do have one quick question.
Sure.
Caitlin Hill says, I've never experienced this herself. How long does insurance usually make you try before failing?
I don't know the answer to that, but it's probably, you know, you're probably going to have to go through a dosing process before you failed. So, you know, that could take weeks and it could take months. That's really going to depend upon the insurance company and really what that situation was. For example, if you know you have an allergic reaction to something, you know, you're going to have an allergic reaction pretty quickly. That failure is going to happen fast. If it's something else, it depends on how fast you fail, I would imagine. Okay, so I'm going to keep us going to copay accumulators, which is another fun math one for you. This is one where you are on a drug that's expensive, because that's why you would have a copay card. And the manufacturer offers a copay card. So let's say you've got a drug that costs $1,000, and the manufacturer has a copay assistance card that says you can have it for $100. So when you go and you're in your deductible period, you would go and pay at $100, because you would go to CVS or Walgreens with this copay card, and you would pay $100 and get that $1,000 list price drug. You would get $1,000 credit to your deductible in that scenario, unless there's a copay accumulator program in place. So what would happen is you would get $1,000 towards your deductible, and next month you get another $1,000. You pay another $100, but you get $1,000, which is great for you. And If it's a $3,000 deductible, because the math is simple, on the third month, you've met your deductible. And then beyond that, you're now typically in a copay situation, which would be a $35, $50, whatever the plan would be. With a copay accumulator, you don't get the $1,000 credit towards your deductible. You only get the $100 credit towards the deductible. Now, the plan itself didn't have to pay the $1,000. So understand that while you're in your deductible and you've paid $100, it's not like the plan paid the other $900. Your employer or the health plan, the insurance company, did not pay that $900. So they didn't have to pay that. Now, if they put this copay accumulator in place, after the third month, you're out of the copay. The copay card is expired, and sometimes it takes more than 3 months. But in this analogy, the copay card expires. You've paid $300. Now you got to pay $1,000, and you're still $2,700. Well, now you're $1,700 away from your $3,000 deductible. So now you can't afford that $1,000. The next month you've got to pay another $1,000 that you cannot afford. But now you've been on the drug for 3 months, it's working, and you're in a situation where you may well have to start rationing that drug or discontinuing its use. And that's really the danger of this, is that the patients are getting faced with an unexplained or a unexpected bill, and the insurance company is making out like a bandit because they got the $900 copay card, they got all the credit for that. And then for the next couple months, you're still paying the full freight. So the insurance company really has won at the expense of the patient. So now I want to move us to federal government and preserving the gains and the coverage gains that have happened. And I want to make sure we all understand that federal advocacy can cause indigestion. Or perhaps maybe it's an allergic reaction when you kind of get hives when sometimes you talk about the government and Congress and things like that. And so, you got to be careful which bowl of nuts you're going to go take some. I'll get off the analogy, but thanks for watching. As we sit here today, pre-existing conditions are at significant risk. If you saw the news yesterday, the Trump administration filed suit with a briefing with the Supreme Court to get the Affordable Care Act struck down in its entirety. In the middle of a pandemic, they did this literally yesterday. If we lose the Affordable Care Act, pre-existing conditions go away. The protection against pre-existing, the condition stays. I don't think we're going to get rid of diabetes between now and when the Supreme Court rules. But most of you may not remember a time when your insurance company could simply deny you because of your diabetes, but I remember it quite well. And if you had diabetes, when I would join a health plan, it wouldn't cover my diabetes for 6 months to a year, depending upon the plan, until I've had, quote, tenure in that plan, and then it would start covering for my diabetes, which is just insane, and puts me at risk. So why would I change jobs? That was the world prior to getting some of these pre-existing condition protections that came with the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act. If these go away, those things will start happening again. Guaranteed issue, they could just deny you coverage. In addition, in that Affordable Care Act is what's allowing kids children up to the age of 26 to stay on a health plan. We want to expand that age to 30 or 32, and this would just eliminate it altogether. So please pay attention to this, and this is a huge deal. This would probably be the biggest blow to medical advocacy, the work that we've been doing in probably a couple of decades if we lose that. So let's talk about COVID-19 and diabetes. So COVID-19 is changing the landscape of advocacy and policy. in addition to the fact that it's pretty bad for people with diabetes, so you don't want to get it. So if you're not socially distancing, please do. Clearly, we're doing so on this call. And you don't need to mask up on this call, although you're wishing I wore a mask because I didn't shave well enough today. But COVID-19 is changing how the world's working a bit. And so first off, obviously, people with diabetes have a significantly worse outcomes. And 32% of ICU patients are people with diabetes. But it's exposing flaws in our current policy. So as an example, during this process, insurance companies have granted waivers, and CMS and the Medical Center of Medicaid and Medicare have granted waivers for telehealth. You say, oh, telehealth is being used now, and you think, well, that's a no-brainer. Like, we're using this kind of technology to have this conversation today. Doctors should be using that. Why aren't doctors using that? Well, the reason is they're not getting paid for it. Why would a doctor talk to you over a video chat when if you went to the office, they could make $150? They talk to you for free for 20 minutes, or they could see you for 20 minutes in their office and make $150. They're going to see you in the office. During this pandemic, that changed, and insurance companies said, okay, we're going to start paying the doctors at the office rates for these telehealth visits. Some of them maybe not quite the full rate, some of them a little bit. A lot of that barrier was eliminated. Literally yesterday, I was seeing that the use of telehealth has started to go down in the past 30 days because the ability to get reimbursements for it is already waning, and they're already afraid that they're not going to get paid if they stay on telehealth. We need to tell Congress and the insurance companies that needs to stay in place. Telehealth is very important for people with diabetes. It's important for people living in rural locations. Management of a chronic disease. A lot of times when you're having a chat with your endocrinologist, you're having a conversation. How things going? What's going on? Yeah, your lab tests happen elsewhere, but telehealth is a key way for people to have a better health outcome, and we've got to make sure those things stay in place. Other things that have happened with COVID-19, the ADA and JDRF, if you're not tuned into this, I mean, the economy has really gone to hell in a handbasket. It's really, we're in some trouble right now. Both of those organizations have laid off 40+% of their staff nationwide. And so, this is a good time to be thinking about them, et cetera. But it also means their ability to do what they used to do is not as strong as it was. And we need both of those organizations to be strong. So you should be aware of that. This is not a competition. We're all in this community together, and we've got some very important partners that are in trouble. College Diabetes Network, I'm proud to say, and I've mentioned this on the call on Monday, are participating in a healthcare reform working group that we're helping organize, and ADA is part of that as well, where we're trying to take some of these things from COVID-19 and making them permanent, but we're also taking that a much broader look at healthcare reform overall. Any questions, any comments on any of this? I'm going to pause just in case something's up.
Don't seem to be any questions right now.
I'm going to keep cranking. We promise to be done by noon tomorrow. All right, so the next box here is Medicare, and you're going to say, why should I care about Medicare? And I'll tell you why in a second. And and this next one, the road is paved. The road to where is paved with good intentions. And blood sugar was, Stuart can't see this potentially, but the blood sugar was low, and the friend gave me a Diet Coke. The friend meant well, but he just didn't quite understand. I love bears, so this slide makes me smile, and thank you for humoring me. But you get to Medicare, and you get what in the world? So Medicare will provide 3 glucose test strips a day for someone with type 1 diabetes. 3 a day. Now, many of you are probably on a CGM, and that's great. But when you were on finger sticks, I bet you that you tested a little more than 3 a day. Now, if you want to be on a pump or you want to get a CGM, in order to do that, they require that you're testing 4 times a day, but at the same time, they're only going to pay for 3 of them. Medicare is, it's a government group. It's something that we got to be aware of. And you're thinking, well, gee, I'm in college, hence the College Diabetes Network. I figured that out. You're probably not at Medicare age yet, but Medicare is very often the trendsetter on insurance. What they do very often becomes what commercial insurance does. So when we see something go awry in Medicare, we have to jump on that and advocate for it. So if you see something that says Medicare, you really should pay attention. One, your parents and your grandparents are going to thank you, and I thank you, but this is really in your best interest as well, because heaven forbid commercial insurance starts start doing some of the things that Medicare is doing. So that's why you should care. And it's there's some really crazy things in Medicare. I'm going to talk about diabetes research funding and talk a bit about why we need more. And this is a no-brainer. Federal funding for research is absolutely not keeping pace with the disease. $150 million per year for the special diabetes program. That number was the same number in the 1990s when I was advocating for it then. Okay, that number has not grown at all. I assure you the number of people with diabetes has grown. You know this. The cost of managing and maintaining the disease to humanity and specifically to the government through Medicare, Medicaid has grown exponentially, but that's what they're funding. 150 million is a lot of money, but it's a spit in the bucket on what's really needed. And that 150 million, it's just not anywhere near enough. They renewed it. Yeah, go ahead.
And I apologize, my phone's going in and out as well. The other thing about that funding is back when it was initial, it was a 3-year commitment. Now it's an every year reauthorization, which means it's at risk every single year.
That's a really good point, which means from an advocacy perspective, we've got to go run at that windmill every single year. And the running at a windmill is Don Quixote, if you know that classic, but Man of La Mancha. But you have to, we got to go after this each and every year to make sure we get our quote paltry 150 million. It's very important, but it should be not even 10 times that. It should be 100 times that. Given what diabetes costs this country, the amount that we're investing in it is woefully small. So in the half-hour session we've covered a number of items here, and there are any other number more that we could get into. I'm going to shift us now to how to make a fuss, and we've talked about it before, but I want to see if, again, any questions, any thoughts on any of these topics, anything that we didn't talk about that maybe is a burning question.
We do have another question here in the chat, George, from Caitlin Hill. She asks, with Trump's new $35 insulin price cap for Medicare, do you think we can expect that to follow for other patients?
As far as outside of Medicare, Caitlin, I think yes, I actually do. So if you think of the cost of insulin and the advocacy noise and the fuss making that everyone has done over the past 5 years on this topic, probably longer than that, but let's just say 5 years. Medicare is about to go to $35. Most commercial insurances will offer $25 or in that neighborhood range. So commercial insurance is moving in that direction because they understand, they're starting to get it. They're not necessarily all coming out that way, which is if I work as a chief operating officer and finance officer at a professional services firm. I've been a plan administrator of a self-insured health plan for 20 years. Reason I say this, and I work for a small business. Right? So we've got about 400 people. So it's, it's a small business. It's not IBM. It's not, we don't have tens of thousands of employees. A company of our size, we are self-insured. We are at risk for what our insurance broker or benefit consultant suggests that we do. And if that consultant doesn't know to make sure that insulin is at $25 and not at $300, then we will inadvertently just, here's the basic plan that's been provided. And so part of this advocacy effort is to make sure that all of these commercial plans, that these offerings get to an answer where it's $25, it's $35. I do believe we're really close to getting there, that most of the folks that are covered by commercial insurance will in fact have access to insulin in what we would all agree would be an affordable fashion for commercial insurance. We're not there yet, but we're really close, and I think the day is coming that it'll be fewer and fewer. I mentioned this on Monday, but it's important to reiterate, the uninsured are going to be left behind. The uninsured in this scenario are going to be left behind because we have not, through the $35 Medicare and the $25 whatever happens in the commercial insurance, we have not passed through the rebate. They've just set the copay at a flat dollar amount. So in that scenario, the rebate structure can continue to go, right? So that $300 where 230 of it was a rebate, a year from now, it could be $250 and it could be a rebate and 320 list. And it could be then a 350 list and even longer. And the uninsured are still going to be faced with list unless we are able to work with Congress and get a broader answer done. Or at the state level, when those state caps are put in on insulin, so you hear, a cap at $100, a cap here or there. Those are other ways to ensure that happens. And then lastly, and I will eventually shut up, is that most of the manufacturers have avenues where you can go to them and get insulin for $99 or at $35 or less, in that range. So there are always avenues at this point in time. So we have made a lot of progress, and that $35 for Medicare is a huge deal. Politics aside, that's a big win.
George, there's a question from Emma about diabetes in the prison system and wanting to know where she might find resources. The only place I can think of would be to search the ADA website under Advocacy, because when George and I were there, we did a lot with prisoners and people in jail. We had people that had died when they were incarcerated because low blood sugars were not being recognized, and people were denied access to insulin and diabetes testing supplies while incarcerated. And ADA actually sued a number of people through the legal advocacy area. So Emma, I would suggest you look on the ADA's website, particularly under legal advocacy and prisons. If you can't find it, feel free to reach out to George and I, and we can go to some of the volunteers that were involved in that and see what they could possibly have and find, because we know the people that were doing that. Shireen Arendt was in charge of advocacy at that time. She is retired from ADA. So, but some of the old guys, the old gray hairs that like George and I that are still around may have some resources for you. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, and that's
okay. George, go on.
Okay, that's great. Any other questions? I'm going to talk quickly about the simple fuss-making steps. And this is not hard stuff, but it's important stuff. So it's get the alerts. So if you have signed up for to be an advocate with the ADA, with JDRF, or with DPAC, diabetespac.org, please sign up for all three of them. It is okay to be on all three of them. In fact, it is what you should be doing. That's you want to be able to chime in on absolutely everything, because JDRF does type 1 diabetes at the federal level. That's what they do. They do it well, but they do it at the federal level. ADA does type 1 and type 2, and they do federal and state, but it's hard for them to get to everything, especially at the state level. DPAC does things at the federal level as well, but they do a lot at the state level and probably are the deepest player out there at the state level. So being on all three of them, you'll see everything that's going on. This isn't where if you sign up for one, you don't need the other two. I would advocate, please sign up for all of them. When you get these alerts, if you have never done it, they will click right through, and you'll be ready to send an email to your congressman, your representative, senator, could be at the state level, whatever, and personalize them. So these typically are templates. Go in and write a little note talking about your situation, why it's different, why hey, I live in that state or in your jurisdiction, so you're my representative, you're my senator. Make sure they know that. Send the emails, click send. I know that's really hard. We had to make a number there. At number 3, we typed send the email so that we don't forget that you do that. I'm kidding. Visit them when you're at home. Forgive the fact that it says in Indiana. I should have visit them wherever you happen to be. I didn't actually notice that it still said in Indiana there. But visit your senators and representatives when they're in. And it's okay to talk to their staffers. It's all right. Go in and see them if the senator's not there. Let them know you care about these issues. Tell the story in your own words. And just like if you try to shampoo your hair and you're in the shower, and I have to take my glasses off when I do this, but in the back of that bottle of shampoo, it says lather, it says rinse, and it says repeat. Now, I didn't repeat it today, but you should be repeating this as much as you possibly can. Wash that mess out of it. You just keep it going. Send these emails as often, as frequently as you can, because they do make a difference. When the more calls that happen, 4 or 5 phone calls is a groundswell. So it's very important that we do that.
George, we got another question.
Shoot.
Caitlin asked about contacting the HR director to educate them on diabetes. So let me start, George, and let you finish with that question. And because George and I are going to give you some resources to do that. That is extremely important. And George can speak to that from a personal relationship. The first place I would send you is the Affordable Insulin Project through DPAC. They actually have forms and charts and information that you can print for your employer that will allow you to have that conversation with them that they can do. George has been running an initiative through NDVLC about educating employers. So George, I'll turn it over to you and let you talk from there on.
Sure. The NDVLC Employer Initiative, and we actually partner with JDRF on this, but is something where we talk to employers about their plan design to make sure they don't fall into the trap I described previously, where they're just following what their consultant tells them and they don't realize that they're charging people $300 for insulin in the first quarter until they've met their deductible. And employers don't realize they're doing it. Usually they're not doing it to profiteer typically. Most of the time they're just doing it because they're just totally unaware that the system has set that up and that's happening. So we talk to employers to make sure they're doing the right things in their plan design, that they're treating the pharmacy benefit manager as a vendor, and that they're taking control over the plan that they're providing for their people. So and if that's an issue for your employer, we'd be more than happy to have a conversation with them.
Good job, George. Go on. You can move on.
So the other thing I wanted to talk about here is, and I think that I'm gonna go back to this slide because it's The other thing I want to talk about here is, and plant the seed. We're going to give a presentation at the Children with Diabetes Friends for Life, the virtual session that's happening in July. We're going to talk about who you can advocate to, because you've got federal and state issues, but there's a lot of other folks that you got to advocate for in life. Anytime you're talking to your employer, advocating. So think about these steps and think about that communication and telling your story, and you're advocating all the time. Get the information, state your case, do it in a factual with emotion. It's the combination of facts and the emotional stories that help win the day. If you just have an emotional story and you have no facts to back it up, you're not going to get anywhere. If you have the facts with no emotional story, they probably won't hear you. If you have both of them, that's the winning combination. So I urge you to have all of that. If you're mad about something, make sure you get your facts in order so that when you go in, you've got both things that you can go and that you can use. And when you're ready to make a fuss, go for it. If you don't have to be handy to use these tools, and this is an old 60s, if I had a hammer, I'd hammer in the morning, I'd hammer in the evening, all over this land. That's about all I got. But really appreciate your attention to this. Are you ready to make a fuss? I hope so.